prayer of dedication. O immortal, invisible God, we thank you for the gifts of possessions. We offer what we have to help those in need. For the gift of time, we offer our days of service. For the gift of life, we offer ourselves to be your servants. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
I didn't see the news about those missionaries in Haiti. There are unspeakable horrors and evils in the world. And kidnapping and extortion has been around for a long time. I did read an article about how this is going on in Mexico, where they find someone that they think might have a little bit of money, and they take them and they hold them hostage to their family. And this is something that happens in history, throughout history. It's an awful thing, isn't it? It's an awful thing. And someone you love, you don't know if they're alive or dead. You don't know if you have the money, you don't have the money, you don't know if they're legit. There's so many questions. It's awful, just awful. Supposedly we can put on rose-colored glasses and think, nothing bad will happen to me. But if you're a pastor and you hear people's stories, you find out that, yeah, bad things do happen to people that I know. And sometimes unspeakably difficult things that are just private. You don't even know the difficulties some people go through just to be alive and in life. You don't know how they've suffered, the losses that they've endured. Jesus would walk everywhere because, of course, there were no cars, but he didn't take a horse. He didn't have money like that or a carriage. He was not a money person. He was a walker. And if you were a follower of Jesus, you would walk with him. Literally walk with him from town to town and place to place and looking for a place to sleep that night. If you're in between towns, finding a place under a tree or on the side of a hill somewhere, right? Walking with Jesus. And if you were a traveler in those days, you had to beware of bandits. But if there were enough of you and you had like 12 strong men, probably you were going to be okay. So Jesus and men and women and children traveled together from place to place. They walked together. John calls me on Wednesday mornings, and we walk together. When I first met my beloved Hafida, one of the first things we did was we walked together down by Lake Erie. And I liked how she walked. Because she wasn't too fast and she wasn't too slow. She walked at a pace that was like, let's talk together. What a wonderful thing to walk and talk together. If you're in an airplane, you might be able to talk to the people around you if you want to, but you fly over millions of people that you don't even see. And the same way with a train going past them or in a car. But on a bicycle, then you can start to see people and talk to them and stop. But if you're walking, then you are really right there wherever you are. There's something about walking together that is about as human as it gets. So I'm bringing all this up because of the evil in the world and how Jesus came up against it himself. And how, as he was walking with his disciples, he tried to tell them, look, they're going to kill me. That's how it's going to be. It says in the Gospel of Mark, this was the third time he had told them this. And yet still, they had this idea that even though they were walking, that they were going to be on horses and carriages and thrones. They were thinking about a different future. Jesus told them again and again, but they just didn't seem to be able to hear. So listen to the text for a minute. They were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and this is the last time he goes on this road to Jerusalem. This is the time he goes and he gets arrested and he gets tortured and killed. This is his last trip. This is according to the Gospel of Mark. They were on the road going up to Jerusalem. They're still a long way off. They haven't gotten to Jericho yet in the Bible story. So they're still a long way off, but they're on their way. And Jesus was walking ahead of them. They were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. This is probably related to his teachings and his presence that he had given a little earlier. And he took the 12 aside again and began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death. And then he doesn't say, but he'll get out of it because he's got powers like that. He doesn't say that. If he has powers like that, he's not going to use them. He's going to let them show themselves fully in their violence and their ignorance and their duplicity. He's going to expose them by letting them vent themselves completely. So he says, see, we're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes. They will condemn him to death, and they will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days he will rise again. So they're walking together, and Jesus calls them aside for the third time and says, look, this is how it's going down. Do you understand what we're walking towards? Do you understand? And they do not. They don't understand. It seems as though some of the women understood. The woman that anointed him before, when it's towards the end there, he said, she's anointing me for my burial. Like she maybe understood. So maybe the women heard and the men didn't. There seems to be a theme of that. So, out of nowhere then, the next part of this text is James and John, the sons of Zebedee. They, after Jesus has called them aside and told them this, they come forward to him and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Now, have you ever had a child do that to you, or an adult? Say, promise me yes, and then I'll ask you then I'll say what I want. You never say you'll do something before you know what it is. You're just trying to trap a person. And Herod traps himself like this. He says he gives a blank check to the daughter of Herodias, the young woman who danced, and he says, ask me whatever you want, even half of your kingdom, and I'll give it to you. Just go ahead. Like I'm so powerful and strong, I can give you whatever your little heart desires, even half of my kingdom. And she says, goes to Mom, and she says, we want John the Baptist dead. And she comes to him and says, I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And, okay. So he has to keep it. He stupidly made a promise and gave a blank check to someone and ended up doing great evil. Well, Jesus is not stupid. Jesus is very wise, and we should also be wise. Whenever someone says, please do me a favor, we should do the same thing Jesus did, and then don't make any promises, but first ask, and what might that be? And that's exactly what Jesus does. So here it is again. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to him and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. And he said to them, What is it you want me to do for you? So he didn't say, Sure, whatever you want. No, he said, What? What is it? What is it? And they said to him, Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. So there you would have it. When you go to heaven, you get Jesus, and then you get James on one side and John on the other. I think that's right. Yeah. Just like that. That's where they want to be. And what? They're picturing Jesus, on the throne in glory, and one of them on his right and one of them on his left, ruling the world. Maybe they weren't even thinking like we are about heaven, but they were even thinking about it on earth. Like they hadn't heard what he said just then. They're going to kill me. And I'm going to rise again on the third day. Jesus said to them, You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? So let's talk about that a little bit. They don't know what they're asking. Do we know what they're asking? They want a position of respect in the afterlife, or in this life, beside Jesus. I think that's what they're asking. But he says, do you know what that actually costs? You don't know. It means drinking this drink that I'm about to drink. It means being baptized in this baptism with which I'm about to be baptized. And we know that's the betrayal and the abandonment and the torture and the death on the cross. So he's talking about, do you know how much suffering is involved in that? Do you know what God may ask of you to do? Now, I don't think that we should advise each other to do the most foolish and thing that brings suffering. I don't think we should go to places of danger unnecessarily. I don't think we should put ourselves at risk unnecessarily. But sometimes God does ask us to do things that are requiring of sacrifice. He doesn't say it's a bad thing that they want to be at his left and at his right, that they want to be near him. He just says, do you realize? And they replied, we are able. My grandmother's favorite hymn. Lord, we are able, our spirits are thine, remold and make us like thee divine. I can still hear my grandmother singing it. And she meant it. She spent her whole life trying to follow Jesus as best as she could. In her own way, I'm sure she did. But let's talk about, were they able, are we able to drink the cup and to have the baptism that Jesus is talking about? So what kind of cups has God given you to drink in your life? You could think that the cup to drink is your death. That at the time of my death, then I'll understand this thing. And of course, that's no big deal. We all die. The joke my dad and I were sharing, because my dad is 95 and we were talking about death, and our joke was, just because everyone else has died before us doesn't mean we will. He called that optimism. But of course, everyone dies, so there's nothing particularly special about that. There's nothing particularly unique about dying. Everybody does. But this is not that kind of death. This is a kind of suffering, I think, during life. This is a kind of sacrament of defeat, is what Fowler calls it. And Fowler says that he wrote Stages of Faith, and his idea was that if you have never been tested, if you have never been defeated, there's something they're lacking in you. You don't understand how to be human with others. One of my friends that's a Muslim teacher who was divorced and remarried said divorce was a very humanizing experience for him. And for some of us, sickness is a very humanizing experience for us. Loss of money, loss of status, loss of power. To drink a cup of defeat can actually make us a better person. Because we're not a jerk telling other people, why can't you be like me? Instead, we're more like, I'm so grateful that things aren't worse, and let's all get through this together. So it has a softening effect. But Jesus is talking about the price of standing up for what's right, and how 11 of the 12 apostles, according to the church tradition, were executed largely by angry mobs who had been stirred up by the local powers that they were upsetting things. So, they said they're able, and Jesus' answer to them was, the cup that I drink, you will drink, and the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. So yes, these hard things will come to you. But, he says, to sit at my right hand or my left, it is not mine to grant, but is for those for whom it has been prepared. So that is not a Trinitarian verse. That is a verse where Jesus is treating himself as not being in charge, as not being the one who knows who's going to sit at his right and left, but that is something to God. So first we have Jesus saying, they're walking together, and Jesus says, look, they're going to kill me. And then we have these two come up and say, make us first and second place, please. And he says, do you know what kind of cost there is to following me like that? And they say, we'll do it. We can do it. But then how do the others like this? When the 10 heard this, it's like teacher's pet, daddy's, mommy's favorite, you know. Everyone trying to squeeze in and get, close to Jesus. When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So, here's Jesus. He's on his way to die. And first he has two guys say, can I do this? Can you put us first? And then he's got the people that are angry with him. So, I'm just saying, do you see the distractions that this man had to deal with on his way to his death? He's on his way to his death, and then he has to deal with these two guys that want to be, get in the positions of honor. Then he has to deal with the other ones who are all upset at him. It's like, oh, please, family. I can imagine in the car, he'd say, okay, I'm going to stop this car, and we're going to get out on the side of the road, and up, quit it now. This is what he says. Teaching moment. When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them. All right, Jesus putting out more fires or giving more teachings. Jesus called them and said to them, I have a friend who's a sheikh. That means he's a teacher in the Muslim order. And one of the things that the jokes in his order is, you get the dervishes you deserve. And so it's like, if you have dervishes that are problematic, you get the dervishes you deserve. Well, when I look at Jesus and think he got the disciples he deserved, they weren't the best disciples, which is kind of good. Because that means there's room for us. That means we can fit in with this bunch. Some people, when they get out of seminary, there's like a 30% dropout rate, I hear. Maybe it's even higher. People that go into ministry and then they quit because it's just too hard. And the hardest part is this very thing, where it's people fighting and having disputes with one another. That's what really hurts, isn't it? And it's having to try to fix things that can't be fixed. Trying to get these people to understand each other and work together, and Jesus is trying to get them to understand and work together. But Jesus got the disciples he deserved. Jesus loved these disciples, and he patiently worked with them despite of their ignorance and their failures. And so when we go to seminary, we should be taught what people work is like. Some people that go to seminary, their parents maybe were pastors, and maybe they know a thing or two. Like my parents were teachers, so if I had gone into teaching, I might have had a head start on knowing what teaching might be like. If your parents were lawyers, you might have a good idea what a lawyer's life might be like. Or if you were a drummer, you might know what a drummer's life would be like. God knows, right? Your parents were drummers. Or whatever, nursing. And we would have a better perspective that people work is like this. It never ends. And it's the same way with our families. You know it's the same in our families. The drama never ends. The moments never end. There's always another one. We're never done. My family has some stories. Ooh-wee. It's amazing we're still together sometimes when I think about some of the things we've gotten through. Thanks be to God. And thanks be to God the church is still together and we're together here despite our difficulties. So Jesus calls them together and he says, you know that among the Gentiles, those they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. So he's saying, now look at how it is in the world. They don't walk from town to town like we do. They ride on horses or even get carried by slaves, and their feet maybe never touch the ground, and they don't cook and they don't do dishes because somebody does that for them, and they say jump and the people jump, and they say run over there and they run over there, and that's what it is to be a ruler. That's what it is to be a success. That's what we all want. Or is it? He said to them, you know among the Gentiles, in other words, the people who don't really know God like we Jewish people know God, you know among the Gentiles that those they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you, not so among us. We're different than that way. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. Servant leadership. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. Servant leadership. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life for many. So in the parable of the sheep and the goats, the way the world says it is like this. Come into me, I'm changing the scripture, mind you, so don't think I'm quoting it directly. I'm actually giving it the opposite meaning. Come into me, you blessed ones, because I was the king, and you dressed up and came and bowed down to me. And they said, when did we see you as a king and dress up and come and bow down to you? And he says, whenever you bow down to any king, you bow down to me. I was the one that had the money, and you came and respectfully asked me for a loan. When did we ask you for a loan? Well, whenever you've come to any person who had money and asked them for a loan, you've asked a loan from me. And so I was a general in the army, a centurion, and I had all these soldiers, and you properly took off your hat and showed me respect, so I didn't cut off your head. He said, well, when did we properly show you respect, and so you wouldn't cut off our head? Whenever you've shown respect to any centurion, you've shown respect to me. That is not what Jesus said. He said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was naked and you gave me something to wear. I was a stranger and you took me in. Whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. is the path of service. But there's good news. Good news is this. Say you're going to die, and your life passes before your eyes before you die. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that it sort of is. And you think back over your life, and I can pretty much guarantee it won't matter that you shook the hand of the president or the Pope, kissed his ring. That won't matter. What will matter is wherever you have shown kindness, that will give your heart courage. Wherever you have done what was right, that will give your heart hope. Whenever you have shown compassion and mercy and stood up for justice, that will encourage you in the face of death. And so Jesus is facing his death, and you are facing yours, and I am facing mine. But we're not like the Gentiles, the outsiders, who are playing the wrong game. He who wins with the most toys, dies with the most toys, wins. We are saying who loves most, who serves most, wins. So, beautiful children of God, let's walk together. Let's slow down enough in our lives that we can see and stop and help one another. Because if we rush, we'll miss it.
And all God's people say, Amen. Amen.